Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tabor Talk. I'm your host, Michael Tabor, and it's not very comfortable. I'm actually wearing shorts, but I have this. It's humid and just kind of uncomfortable. But tomorrow's fall too, by the way. So getting right into this, I'm going to talk about a little bit about comedy. Um, Finishing up on the Mark Norman Joe Rogan show. Joe was talking about things that kind of make him recoil. Like when people say this comic's edgy, oh, hold on, this is very edgy stuff. It's like, ugh, gross. It's like, it seems like you're trying too hard, trying to push, you know what I mean? So it's like you would never think of Richard Pryor being edgy and all this and that. So I'm going to come back to that. I am a huge fan of comedy, stand-up comedy, the whole thing, comedy in general, and writing, and TV, film. It's comedy. I love it. It's interesting. They are some of the most interesting people on planet Earth. Comics, they are. They just look at life from a different angle and a different perspective, perhaps taking the familiar and seeing it in an unfamiliar kind of interesting way. All right, so let me come back to that. Let me just show you this. So I'm halfway through the Mark Norman show, and they're talking about the early days. Like no one is immediately a star. You gotta put your time in, right? And it's hard. Joe Rogan wasn't always Joe Rogan. Nobody ever, even Dave Chappelle. I'm sorry, probably the greatest living comedian today. Had just, was on the streets, just on the streets of New York, just doing comedy. We just start talking to Dave Chappelle. Like we all have to put in your time, and it's a long, hard road. But anyway, Mark Norman said that he was living in New York when he was first starting out, and he had a rough go at it. And he said, like, my landlord died of AIDS and this and that, and it may or maybe it's probably true, but he goes, I was mugged 3 times my first year. Now that sounds like, really? Now Joe's good. Joe will call you out. He goes, well, was it knife point or gun point? And you'll hear it's kind of cringeworthy. Let me just play it first and then I'll comment it, because it's like, ooh, here's a guy bullshitting. But let's see. Ready? Joe Rogan, Mark Norman.
Skeller. Yeah, I moved to New York with $400, and I got bed bugs the first year. Landlord died of AIDS.
Whoa.
And I got mugged 3 times in the first year.
Oh, my God.
It was hell, man.
Mugged at, like, what, knife point, gun point?
See?
Well, it was mostly my fault. I'm victim blaming here, but I was always such a blackout drunk that I was just, like, asking to be mugged.
Oh.
I would fall asleep and wake up, and guys were going through my shit. One time I fell asleep on Hell's Kitchen.
Okay,
Remember the bar
pause this
Rudy's?
Okay.
You got a free hot dog with every beer. So it was
See, I feel for the guy. He's a nice guy. He's just trying to be funny. What he should have said, and maybe that's true, there's a difference between getting mugged and rolled, right? So you mug your gunpoint knife, that's what Joe said. And he's like, Joe calls him out, like, what do you mean? Like gunpoint knife, but you were mugged 3 times? Was it a police report? You see what I mean? Being rolled is something different. You fall, you're sleeping, you're a bum. I don't know, I'm not a bum. Bums don't have any money, but he misspoke. He was trying to be outrageous or funny. You know what I mean? Listen, I'm being kind of mean here, I'm being petty. I'm not being mean. I like the guy a lot. But I listen very closely to all these podcasts. Even when I watch a stand-up routine, I go back and forth. I'll watch it, I'll go back, rewind, sometimes take notes, and I'll pick out stuff. So listen, I'm not your average viewer. I'm super critical. All right, so let me talk about comedy. I love it all. I like George Carlin humor, Richard Pryor, outrageous stuff, even some of Dice Clay. Wasn't really a huge fan of Dice Clay, but some of his stuff was funny. Sam Kinison, same sort of thing. I thought Sam was hilarious. Not as great as a lot of people think. Like Joe was always saying how Sam Kinison was the greatest thing like ever, like almost second to only like Richard Pryor or whatever. And I'm like, no, I don't know about that. All right, listen, we all have different tastes. And shock and saying outrageous things. And Joe says, listen, I don't care. If it's funny, anything goes. And I agree. I do have a line though. All right, mocking disabled people, mocking people who are sick, even status sort of stuff. I'm sort of okay. It depends. I know that Jerry Seinfeld used to mock poor people, like, and he still does it. Like he'd say at the airport, "Hey, at the airport," you see, I'm not going to do Jerry Seinfeld's voice, but you know, that's kind of his whole sort of thing, observational thing. Like it was his on his special, his latest with Eddie Murphy, he was talking comedians in cars getting coffee, and they were making. It's kind of funny. Like Jerry's talking about. Like they were he's in his car, like I don't know, they were in a Lamborghini or something, and kind of gross, right? Eddie, super rich celebrities, and you see homeless people, and you see these two homeless people kind of talking to each other, and he goes, "You know what, Eddie? Like one of those guys is giving advice to the other guy. Can you imagine that? Just think about that. Like you see him, like, and it's true. One homeless dude." Is giving another homeless dude advice. I mean, it is funny. It's funny as hell, and I'm not really offended by it. But and there was another thing Eddie was going on about homeless people homeless people hate campers or something. I'm not going to do the joke because it's like they're not the real deal. He goes, "Listen, I really have a tent. I really, it's funny." But anyway, I'm not really offended by that. What I am offended by, or is when you start doing like someone like. And I'll tell you what, someone who's not a comedian was Donald Trump. That offended me tremendously. And I could not believe when he started mocking that New York Times reporter. And again, Donald Trump is not a comedian. He tries to be funny with all his nicknames and all that. He got that from Howard Stern, by the way. All those nicknames, like whatever they are, Nick the Drunk. Howard was doing that in the 80s and 90s. Hank the Angry Alcoholic Dwarf. Like people go back and they think it's new. I go, Stern was doing that in the 80s and 90s. All those nicknames, you know. But anyway, Trump, before he got elected, started going, "Ooh," some guy who's got a neurological disorder. And that was at the time when I was in really bad shape. I have neurological issues. I have a neuromuscular condition, and I was in the doctor's office, seeing all this stuff, people in wheelchairs, kids who were like this and twisted and having problems talking and drooling. And here's this spoiled, rotten man, billionaire, making fun of someone who's got a neurological disorder. I was so sickened by that. And what made it even worse was Fox News tried to justify this and defend it, and even say that Donald Trump has been doing this forever, regardless of whether you're disabled or not. And it's just horrible, man. It was the grossest thing. Like, shame on Trump and shame on Fox News for trying to defend this animal. So, yes, that offends me. Even going back, again, as I said, I'm a comedy fan, going back to Richard Pryor, I think did some stuff about people who were retarded, and I was like, ooh, I almost never went back to him because of that. And Pryor is a genius, by the way. So that's my line. Stuff over which you have no control, right? Like physically, how you look. And I don't have too much of a problem calling someone ugly. I mean, I don't like it, but it's okay. Like fat, it seems like you sort of have control over that. Like you could lose weight. You kind of, maybe not, maybe it's some sort of physical thing, but you kind of like, oh, you fat slob. Like Howard used to do that all the time, you big fat slob. And you kind of think like, oh, yeah. Howard used to go real deep with midgets and, a lot of that stuff. But I'll tell you what, Howard was more of a satirist. He wasn't hateful, right? Yeah, he had Hank the Angry Alcoholic Drunk, and he had all these people. And yes, he did cross the line sometimes. I'm like, Howard, stop. But he wasn't, I'm not sure if this is true, because Howard could be very mean and vicious. Howard's a complicated guy. He's an old fuck now. He's kind of not even relevant. But now you're comparing, I'm kind of all over the place here, but Howard, who is a comedian, and then someone like a Trump who's not, who thinks he's funny. Howard is not hateful. Trump is. I mean, Trump is just a monster piece of shit. All right, so how I got from stand-up comedy to Donald Trump, that's what it is. Tabor Talk. Talking shit, just talking Tabor informally, spontaneous. Okay, I'm up to 10 minutes. Good books, good friends, and a sleepy conscience. Peace, love, and understanding here on Tabor Talk.